Hello, and welcome to the Brenton Peck Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Reverend Dr. Jean Thomas. Jean serves as the early childhood pastor at Nampa First Church of the Nazarene and teaches as an adjunct professor at Northwest Nazarene University. She's been in pastoral ministry for over 2 decades while also raising 4 children with her husband. Her story is one answering a call to ministry during college years, stepping into seminary and ordination, and then learning how to hold together the weight of pastoral leadership and the demands of motherhood. Across the past 25 plus years, she served in sessions of volunteer ministry, part-time staff, and full-time pastoral work, while also building a voice as a professor. In this conversation, we'll explore the road that brought her here, the decisions, sacrifices, and challenges of pursuing both ministry and family, what she's learned in the process, and how her journey has shaped her vision for discipleship and the church today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's walk all the way back. When did you first know you wanted to go into ministry?
Right. Yeah, that was clear freshman year in college. And I showed up at NNU not knowing what my major would be. And so I was general studies like so many students. But, it's expensive to go to college. And I felt like, man, I'm paying all of this money. I've really got to figure out what I'm doing. But also as a Christian, I really had my heart's desire was to do what God would have me do. And so I just spent hours upon hours upon hours praying about it. There was this really, to me, lovely prayer chapel in our dorm, like up on the upper level. And it was really just a dusty old room, but there were altars in there and I would go there daily and spend long, hours in prayer. And through that process, really began to wonder, maybe I am called to ministry. It was one of those scenarios where I didn't know women could be called to ministry. Didn't know that was a thing, that women could be pastors. I was really blessed, actually, to be at NNU at just the right time. Dr. C.S. Coles had just written a book called A Women's Place, specifically about women in ministry. And I was got to take one of his classes, well, many of his classes, but one in particular where we read through that book. And so that helped me see that maybe that call that I was feeling was actually a call to pastoral ministry. But still more hours. You don't want to just jump into it foolhardy, in a foolhardy way. But then one day I was praying and came across Isaiah 6. And just for anyone who doesn't remember or maybe doesn't know Isaiah 6, Isaiah is in the Holy of Holies and he's at the altar and God's presence shows up and Isaiah says, "Woe to me! Basically I'm a sinner," is what he's saying. But I have unclean lips. I'm from a people of unclean lips. And the angel of the Lord takes a coal from the altar and puts it to his mouth. And through this process, Isaiah is purified. And through this narrative in the Bible, God says, "Who will go for me?" And Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me." And that was kind of the confirmation of, this is really my heart's desire. I just didn't think that I was qualified, which I wasn't, but not by virtue of being female, just because God brings us all along, right? God helps us learn and grow, and really felt God was including me in that call. So it wasn't a matter of avoiding a call. Sometimes you hear that story from pastors, but of just really, I can be included as well. Like for me, it's always been a great honor to be called to be in ministry. So.
It almost kind of sounds like it's a story of self-doubt. Like, can I really do this? Or am I really called? Is there room? Yeah. Is this just something that's in my head? Or like really pray it out, feel, is this my calling?
Yes. I mean, and there's so many layers to that from, even just a few months before starting that really intensive time of prayer, season of prayer, not even realizing women could be pastors at all, to start there and then to add all of the personal insecurities. And, I was 18, you don't know anything when you're 18 or, some, but heading out into the world, it's a position of really needing having a lot to learn
Yes.
and a lot of room to grow. So
I think we all have a lot to learn at 18. And you said you didn't feel qualified. It's like, I don't think any of us are qualified for anything we're going into. Like, that's the journey.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
So you're a children's pastor now. Did you start with an interest in children's ministry, or did you have a specific direction, or was it just wanting to go into ministry in general?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really did feel I was called to pastoral ministry, whatever form that would take. And through that prayer time, just told God, I'll go wherever the doors are open. I had just, again, the way God brings you along, because, of course, this was 30 some years ago now, children's pastors were just beginning to be a thing. Like, there were a few, maybe a handful anywhere. But one of them happened to be at my church where I grew up, where I was a teen, Puyallup Church of the Nazarene. And we had a children's pastor who was male, but his name happened to be Pastor Gene. And so, which is funny to say now because I was not Pastor Gene at that time, but had done a lot of volunteering in children's ministry. And so that was actually a very natural fit, and headed into ministry. Then that was also a place where doors opened for me to go into children's ministry. And of course, I love it.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Well, a fun aside there. We were in Yelm, Washington for a while. So we were at several of those churches. I think I did some Bible quizzing at Puyallup.
Oh, I'm sure you did. Yes. That's fun. That's fun.
So it was into ministry in any direction God led you.
Yes.
So was there, as you were going through college, was he leading you in a specific direction? Did that take form that early, or how did that kind of progress?
Mm-hmm. So throughout college, so they had it set up at that point where you would do short-term internships. And I did a variety, mostly with children, a few were with teens. And then I did end up volunteering with teens in my young adult years because, of course, my husband was a youth pastor. So that turned out. But I even got to serve a stint as a youth pastor for a brief time, which I also very much enjoyed. I went ahead and took like Greek and homiletics and all of those courses. And I feel like especially the homiletics, the preaching courses, because I've had opportunity to preach here and there, which I really enjoy. So feeling that call as well. But of course, in children's ministry, you're not doing childcare. Sunday mornings, that's worship. Yes. And when you're sharing the word, you're sharing the word. It's not a lesser form of ministry. It's not a lesser time of worship. If anything, Jesus very clearly said, unless you become like one of these children. So I feel like these are our examples in worship.
Yeah.
So I got to have that experience several places, and then shortly, including at Nampa First, where I'm at now. I haven't been there this whole time. I interned there, and then it was really fun to come back a decade ago, as the early childhood pastor eventually. But
nice.
Yeah.
So did you meet your husband in college at NNU?
Yes, we met. We didn't. This was providential. because NNU is a small school, and our class, was a much smaller class than the classes they have there now, because this was a while ago. But somehow we managed not to actually meet each other until right before our senior year. And we just we figured that we both had some growing up to do before we met each other. And of course, it turns out we had, with NNU being what it was, many friends in common, crossover of kind of friend groups. And after we got married, we're putting our books up on the shelf, and we'd have duplicates from classes and realize we had been in the same class and still had managed to miss each other. So that was kind of funny. But yes, we met senior year and then married at the end of summer after graduation.
So you said he was a youth pastor. So did you get married and then you were doing some of those internships after, or was that during school, like prior to this?
Yes, the internships were during school. He was actually an education major, but still called to ministry. So that was an interesting twist for him. But then that first year we stayed in Nampa, and he was youth pastor, and I started then volunteering with the kids and just helping him as well. I'm going to grab a tissue. Helping him as well. And then a year after that, we moved to Marysville, Washington, where he was hired as the youth pastor, and I was hired as the children's pastor a little bit after that. So nice. Then it just it just fit so well. It fits so well.
Yeah.
The way God lays out those paths for you.
I'm a little curious on some of the dynamics. Historically, a lot of times you've heard just one person called into the ministry, and then the other supports them in some way. And I've seen that on both sides, either the woman's called into ministry or the man, or sometimes both. But I'm curious, when both are called, how does that work out? Because a lot of churches might not have multiple openings.
Yeah.
Does that make it harder to find joint positions, or do some churches create a position so that you can both go? What does that look like?
Right. Well, I will say that has caused me personally a lot of angst over the years, as especially as we started having kids. Then I wasn't wanting to work full time. I wanted to work part time. But then it made sense to go where Brian was called. We always every time, we just had to trust that God would work it out. And sometimes it took a while. Even coming here to Nampa First, Brian's just celebrated his 10th year as pastor of Nampa First, but I've just passed the 6-year mark as being on staff at Nampa First. That one, as we were here, and I even ended up working at a nonprofit for a while. But then Pastor Carol was retiring, and she recruited me, basically, which was maybe not as hard of a sell as she thought it would be, considering my heart was in children's ministry. But but God has worked out something similar every place that we've been. I don't think I'm just double checking my memory. No, they haven't ever created a position for me. But sometimes it's been a little while before whatever position that was opened up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I grew up Air Force, so I moved around to a lot of different churches. But one of the things that I think I saw a couple times was you'd have the lead pastor, and then the other one would maybe it wasn't a pastoral position, but take over leading worship or the praise team, or there was always some way that they were able to get involved. But.
Yes. And that is, children's ministry is one of those spots where you just kind of always need more help. So it worked out.
Yeah. So going back to that, you obviously have your doctorate now. So you went back for your master's. Did that happen after you had kids, or did you pursue master's first? Master's
first. Brian and I think it was about 3 years after we got married. And we both attended seminary at the same time. And really fun. We were ordained a minute apart from each other. Nice. The same ordination service. And then it was after seminary that we started having kids. So
Yes.
I just didn't think that I would have the capacity to do both at the same time. And now, having done both separately, I think that was wise. I don't think I have the capacity to do, some people can, but that would be a lot. Yeah. Especially, when they were little, especially.
Yeah.
So
more power to them. Like, I work from home at the moment, and kids take a lot of energy.
Yes, they do. They do. It's if you're with kids, that's a job.
Yes.
Like it's not like just something on the side.
No. So after seminary, what does the path look like? You both were now pastors. When did you decide to go back for your doctorate?
Right. That wasn't until many years later, which was 6 years ago now. 6 years ago already now. So, of course, our kids were older. And, it gets busy in a different way when they're older, but it wasn't that intensive early childhood phase of parenting. And yes, so I did go back at that point and then graduated. It was a 3-year program that I did through Nazarene Theological Seminary. And that was through that process, started working on the project that became my book. But yeah, and that was quite busy, I guess, like quite intensive in itself, like just trying to, because I was still working full time and we did still have kids, even though they weren't young anymore or as young. But also, and I wouldn't have ever, who could see it coming, but the pandemic really helped because everything else shut down right at the time that I needed to really focus in on studying with any extra time that I had. And so that freed up time that I wouldn't have otherwise had. So the one positive thing, and of course you would never choose that direction, but that again, just the way God worked things out, like, hey, this would be good timing. Let's jump in now.
So how did you balance all of that? Because you're full-time in the children's program. If you started 6 years ago, you said you've now been at Nampa First for 6 years. So that's roughly the same timing. So you would have been starting a degree at the same time you're taking over a program. So it's not like you've had a chance to settle into this role yet and have a routine, and you're balancing your kids.
Right. I'm trying to think. What was I think it must have been, it was actually close to a year difference. It just still, I think, falls into that 6-year time frame. So maybe 5.5 years. Where are we at?
So a little bit more of a chance to settle in.
So there was some time. My timeline gets a little fuzzy, I think, in my own memory, but yes, and that was a surprise as well. I started at Nampa First, and 4 months later we're in the pandemic, which was a very different kind of ministry, and trying to find your way through how to pastor in those circumstances. And then, a few months after that, started looking into the doctoral program, and it was a lot. I will say that's where your parenting partner really comes into play a lot. Brian had done his doctorate when our kids were little. And so I was picking up some of the slack there. This time around, Brian was picking up the slack, and really works well if you're part of a team.
Yes.
But I don't know that everything would have been able to happen otherwise. There's just only so much time.
Yeah.
And only so much you can get, no matter how efficient you are, there's only so much you can get done in the time you have. But,
yes. So starting up with the children's program, hitting the pandemic, like how did that affect things? I saw some churches that just almost lost their children's program because so many people stopped coming.
Well, and we did have a period of time where the church shut down. And so we weren't meeting in person for it felt like forever. I guess looking back, it was really technically a matter of months, but it felt like forever. So there was a huge learning curve because for me, not being super techie, because so many things got moved online. But it is where I started our little Church for Littles video that we've got a whole collection of now. But so a lot of effort went into that. And then a lot of effort went into, we had preschoolers on Zoom, and it worked better than you would imagine. You have to keep it short and sweet. You have to keep things moving. But unlike in a in-person class where you have to have so many, you have your parent or adult-child ratios and all of that, one person can do the Zoom meeting. And if a kid's just getting too wild, you can mute them. They were so cute. They were so cute to have all those little boxes on the screen. And they adapted, at least to that piece, shockingly well. I think it was, the hardest part was me, the old person, figuring out how to make it happen. I admit I copied my daughter's elementary school teacher who I overheard in their Zoom meetings and pulled some ideas for how she had adapted and pulled those into like our little Benson Buddies Wednesday nights meetings. And
nice.
But we still had to keep it really short.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were a lot of things going out through the mail, a lot of, any kind of contact that we could keep. And that was part of the whole Church for Littles dynamic was, I know it's not going to be professional. There's only so much that myself and our volunteers can do on iMovie, right? But the whole goal was to keep it personal. And that was the choice to create our own versus buying content that we could send out so that the kids were still seeing their teachers, and we even had the kids involved often and recorded on with permission and parental permission and all of that. But so that they were seeing us and they were seeing each other. There was a fun moment where we had a child show up at our church who I hadn't met before and had actually been living in another country, but had connections with our church and had been watching Church for Littles. And nice. She saw me in the hallway and just ran up and gave me a hug. I'd never seen her before, but she'd seen me. And that was a great introduction. So then when she did come to our church and everything was open, she already felt comfortable just because she was familiar from seeing myself and our teachers and our kids online. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do that forever.
No. The
matter of months, that was longer than I cared for. But in person is much better. But God worked it out, I guess. God really worked out some of those creative methods and, options that we wouldn't have had in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there any lessons or anything that you carried forward from that you kept in practice? What can we, I guess, take out of that hard period that we can apply going forward?
I think really and partially this is probably just because I was just talking about it, but that reinforcement that while we want our programs to be excellent, we want them to be professional, and we work really hard to make them the best, right? As good as they possibly can be. And we're pulling in all the educational things, all the theological things, all the early child, everything we can to make it excellent. But that what really matters is the personal.
Yes.
And that was definitely highlighted throughout the pandemic. In every age group, in every age group, if you didn't know it before, you sure know it now. Your online substitutes are no substitute really for in-person. But then also just that, I guess when I say personal, you do want it to be personal, but that also designates relationship.
Yeah.
Well,
we were created as relational beings, and it's hard to do virtual relationships.
Yes. You can get by for a while.
Yes.
But even just my own personal, the friend I always had coffee with, we did a Zoom and we each had I drink tea, but each had our hot drinks and we Zoomed and, it was not the same,
No.
but we gave it a shot. So
my experience that comes to mind was Dad being Air Force, and my sister wasn't medically cleared to leave the U.S. So any time Dad got stationed overseas, we couldn't go with him. Whereas other military families, you could take the whole family with you, unless if it was like a 3-month or less, then they go by themselves. But a long tour, he had to go by himself.
Yeah.
And so all you had was Skype or letters and
yeah.
I mean, yeah, you do everything you can, but it's not a substitute.
Yes. I will confess, my sister and I will talk on the phone. And when we don't do it super often, but when we do, it's hours at a time.
Yes.
But even that's just kind of getting us to the next time we're in person. So
yeah. Are there any virtual programs that still carry on to add extra value or extra reach? Because you had the one kid that was watching you that came up after. So do we still have outreaches like that can still hit some of those that can't make it?
Yeah. We've left all the ones that we had up. So as those lessons come up in our curriculum, in our scope and sequence, we'll highlight them again. But they take immense time and effort. And I probably hung on to it longer than I should have for the amount of time that it took, amount of just, I say resources, but not, they were free to make, but they just took so much time and effort from multiple people. However, I guess I say that, and then just this past week, I sent out a little video clip of Teacher Sharon doing the first verse of Psalm 23, because our kindergartners learn Psalm 23 every year, and finally clicked, hey, this would be an easy way for parents to practice with kids at home. And so I think some of those skills, now that I know how to use iMovie, still personal over professional, but so some of those things, I think, but it took a while to kind of come back to, okay, I think that's enough. Now let's focus on our in-person, and then the rest will be a supplement.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back a little bit now, because we're going to get into your book. After your doctorate, you started writing your book, and that covers the challenges of motherhood and ministry, especially going hand in hand. So going back in your ministry as you were becoming a mother and still progressing through ministry, what did that look like for you? What challenges did that bring up?
Well, and I think that's why I started the particular research I did, was just because it was so hard. It really was, I was giving it my all and still not feeling like I was ever successful. Just, and not to say that there was great joy and great enjoyment, but I spent a whole lot of time just absolutely exhausted. And I would say that's not specific to ministry. No. That's specific to motherhood. And that's where when I started doing the research, because honestly, at first I kind of thought it's just me. If I can just try harder, if I can just put in more effort, then I can make it all happen. And then really started to realize in ministry, but kind of on the other side, like I still have kids at home, so it's not like I'm on the other side of parenting, but on the other side of especially those intense early childhood years, and now 2 of my kids are out of the house and we've got 2 left at home. But leading moms groups through church settings in particular, realize, oh, it's not just me. Everyone is struggling. Everyone is having a hard time. And so when I really started doing the research, I kind of went in with the mindset of, surely there's some spiritual formation, something that can help. We go to God for our help. God is our rock, right? Yes. And the very specific program I was in was spiritual formations. The spiritual formation in Christian discipleship was the official term of the program. So I just kind of went in with this vague idea. There's got to be something here that can help all of the mothers. And when I got into the research, was quite surprised to realize that it hasn't always been this way. The expectations and pressures that moms face, that moms are under in 2025, they had a whole whole list of other things that they were dealing with, but that's not what the women of the Bible were dealing with. And started tracking through history. And when we get in, so yeah. in the first chapter, tracks through history of just starting with even colonial America. It wasn't like that, and tracking through U.S. history on layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of these additional burdens, really, that were being added to the mother's plate specifically, not parents in general, although I think that would have been, certainly more equal, but added to the mother's plate that we still carry today. And honestly, I had assumed and just made my incorrect assumption that part of why I was seeing that and seeing all of those extra pressures was because I was in the evangelical church, and we tend towards the traditional, right? Yep. And so I was assuming that the reason I was feeling those extra burdens and seeing them in the friends around me who were also part of the evangelical church was because it was specific to kind of the traditional family structure that we have really carried on in the church. When I started to do the research, I realized that wasn't the case. It is culture-wide, society-wide. The church is not different than American society in that way, which I was kind of blown away by. But the research I was doing, much of it was not church specific. It was just U.S. specific. During this era, during this era, during this era, all of these layers kept adding on. And that remained true through like the women's movement and through all of those kinds of things that were making an attempt of pushing back against some of that. And I agree that it wasn't perfect, but those layers continued to build to the point that it's really unsustainable, which is why it's so hard. We're trying to sustain something that is unsustainable. But then honestly, the church does add other layers that the rest of society doesn't. But this was the surprise. Rather than being countercultural in the area of mothering expectations, the church mirrored the world on that, the world being society. And I didn't see that coming. I was really surprised by that. But so then I started to dive in and say, well, what is it then? Or what should it be? Or how has it been in the past? How did God set it up to be in the first place?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What comes to mind to me is another layer on what I read on your book. Mm-hmm. Well, first, men and women, quite often, everybody deals with different shame points. But as a society, like where we're at right now, I can't speak historically. I haven't studied that. But one of the biggest shame points I've seen for women is around motherhood. Mm-hmm. For men, it might be around their career or something else. But like shame around motherhood. And what comes to mind for me is we are more individualistic as a society than we've ever been. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways you combat shame is in relationships, in realizing this isn't just me. There's not something wrong with me. It's not that I'm not trying hard enough or whatever. So I'm wondering if there's a component of becoming more individualistic as a society and having less of that communal relationships that we had through a lot of history, where you would have tribes or families of those support, where now, we move away. I'm going to move across the country. I'm going to go over here. We lose a lot of our support systems and that connection with others. And so we internalize a lot of the shame. I'm curious if there's that extra layer present there, that it's like, now I have no one to talk to, so I'm just going to internalize it, and it builds and builds and builds on these stories we tell ourselves.
I mean, absolutely. And I assume you mean specific to mothering.
Yeah, in this case,
but we've all heard that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, but it used to actually be the village raising the child. It wasn't the mom raising the child. And of course, mothers were absolutely involved in childcare, but even in their house, which was much smaller than the houses that we have today, and everyone didn't have their own bedroom, and all of those, even in our own families, were more alone. But which is not, my kids have their own room, like that's not. But as children were growing up, their authority or their source of nurture or their source of care was not just mom or even mom and dad. It was the whole house. They were living with grandparents and they were living with older siblings, and there was a whole household there, and everyone was helping raise that child.
Yeah.
And even the responsibility didn't specifically land on. And so I started the first chapter I start in colonial America and trace kind of through the U.S. But then in later chapters, I look at like women from the Bible who were mothers, women from church history who were mothers. But even colonial America, it wasn't the mom's responsibility to raise the child. That was the dad's responsibility, actually. And in many ways, it was the town that they lived in, the colony they lived in. And of course, the moms did a lot of the work. They did the heavy lifting. But when it came down to it, the person responsible wasn't even the mom. And of course, that has drastically changed.
Yes.
Drastically changed. So that now I think we've done a better job. Dads aren't totally off the hook, but it's still really how your children are doing seems to reflect on how the mom has been doing as a mother.
Yep.
Versus how grandma and grandpa have been doing, or aunts and uncles have been doing. No one would look and say, well, that auntie should have done more to help that child. Or, so that communal aspect, even just in the responsibility. But of course, then the extra layer of specific to what you were speaking of was they don't, like now, sorry, I'm formulating my sentence. Like now as a mom, if I'm struggling, I know I have friends I can reach out to, and even family like my sister or whatever. And we can kind of commiserate, and we've got our little moms groups, even our church has a moms group specific, and those are wonderful. And there is a lot of, I think just what you were saying, how it helps kind of alleviate that shame, just to realize, actually, it's not just me. We're all struggling with the same thing, which makes it more acceptable, right?
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have been struggling with that in the first place because it wouldn't have landed all on them. So they not only can commiserate with, oh, this child is teething or whatever, but also they wouldn't have had that individualist personal guilt that things weren't being done perfectly because it was a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess what I was getting at a little bit was, I think the isolationism, individualism, maybe a better term, compounded it and built it up, because the more you're ashamed, the less you want to talk about it. You
Right.
internalize it, try and take more responsibility and hide it, which then makes you more individualistic, which then builds up more shame. And it just seems like a compounding effect, where if you're able to talk to others and see, wait, I'm not alone. We can share this. We can share the responsibility. We can lean on each other. It seems like one of the solutions in my mind is building more of that community. And I don't think that's the entire solution, obviously, but I do see a compounding effect there.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree. And I think that community can and should extend beyond just other mothers.
Yes.
And that's where the church can play such a beautiful role, not only in allowing space specific to moms, to come together, but for parents to come together. And then we call it our church family. This is our village. And of course, there are lines and boundaries now that there didn't used to be back in the day. You might not want one of the grandmas or grandpas of the church coming and telling your kid this or that. But we are a church family, and this is our village, and we do share in that responsibility. We just did a baby dedication recently, and part of every baby dedication that we do, the pastor, which is often me, I love this, gets to turn to the church after we've talked to the parents and talked to the family and said, will you commit to raise this child in the Lord? Basically, then we turn to the church family and ask the same thing. And that's very meaningful. And I know probably not everyone who just happened to show up that Sunday into worship is taking it as seriously as others, but there are those in that church congregation that really mean it when they say, yes, we will help. That's our family.
Yes.
And that's the village that's going to help us, or has the potential to help us, I should say.
Yeah. Another thing comes to mind. So my mom wrote a book, and in your book, both of you reference, I can't think of her title offhand, but Diane Leclerc. Is it Dr. Diane Leclerc? She talks about the idol of relationships and placing your identity in others. And so I see a compounding effect between placing your identity in your kids, and I think this could go for fathers, dads, anyone. I think mothers feel it more, where you're placing your identity in your kids. If they do something wrong, it's then because I didn't teach them right, or it was something I did wrong. And then that leads into that shame trigger, which then we separate. And so I see this as the more we can, I don't want to say outsource, that's not the word I'm looking for, but maybe the more we can lean on and accept help and wisdom and learning from those around us, and share the responsibility of our kids and our relationships, the more it closes off that individualism, isolation, and we can kind of walk forward and not struggle as much with internalizing everything as that idol of relationships.
Yes, I agree. That is another area we can really help each other. And so Diane Leclerc did write a book on that specific. She's written many books and they're all excellent. But she did write one specifically on that topic. She's referencing back also Phoebe Palmer, who is, of course, really important in our Wesleyan holiness history. But so Phoebe Palmer is one who first started talking about relational idolatry. And she has actually these heartbreaking stories of losing children and realizing that she was putting them in her heart above God and had in that way made an idol of them. And so then Diane Leclerc comes along and says, hey, she's right, and that's sinful. She calls it for what it is, because she's Dr. Leclerc. But that's sinful. And what is really interesting is that so often in the church, we don't recognize that, because church and society at large has basically, the messaging has been very, very consistent down through the years, down through the generations, but then everywhere you turn, any sort of media, social media, online, books, magazines, especially in years past when magazines were bigger than they are now, but also in our Bible studies, in our women's groups, in our moms groups, in our sermons from the pulpits, the message over and over and over again is, moms, this is your most important job. And I think we've missed something, because it is an important job and it's a very high importance. It's of very high importance. And I think maybe some of that was trying to communicate how exceptionally valid it is to be a mother, and how worthy it is, how worthwhile it is to spend your time doing that, which is true, but it's not the most important thing. And that's where we get tangled up, because yes, it is important. And I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. I won't say I've never struggled with relational idolatry in that way myself, because you love your children more than you love yourself, and that's pretty, I don't want to say it's taken for granted, because it's so deep and so fierce. But you do have to remember, wait, what are we called to? As we're called to disciples, right? Be disciples. What are we called to? We're called to be disciples of Christ, which may or may not include mothering. But the message has consistently been, put your children above all else. And that's not what we're called to as disciples.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's one of the main reasons I started the podcast, actually, is there's a lot of good in slogans or in phrases that we hear, or self-help, but nothing can be applied to absolutely everything. A blanket statement can do a lot of good. It can also do harm.
Yeah.
And so to say that the end-all, be-all, the only thing you should put above everything else is being a mother, leaves out a huge part of the picture.
Yeah.
Like, if it comes down to it, I mean, sure, that's a blanket statement. If the house is on fire, are you saving your kids or your pet? Of course, your kids. Your kids come first. So, I mean, you can apply that blanket statement. But when it comes to your faith, we are called to put God first. That doesn't mean don't care about your kids. And I think that same thing can apply to dads, too. One of the things I've said, like, my wife and I talked a lot about, what is our vision? Where do we want to be in 5 years or 10 years? And so we talked about a lot of different things. It's like, money's not important to me. I don't care about being rich or anything like that. There's so much more to life than that. One thing I came back to for me is legacy. But what is a legacy? No matter how much or how successful or anything I do, my kids have more capacity to have an impact on the world than I can ever have alone. So it's like, the legacy I can give is to pour into my kids. That still doesn't necessarily mean my kids are first in that they're above God. I think that means I raise them to love God and put God first. And then, of course, again, back to the house fire thing, I'm going to save my kids above anything. But there's so much more nuance than a simple blanket statement of kids are first over everything. Everything's a balancing act. You can say kids are first, but if you don't prioritize your career to a degree sometimes, then you can't provide for your kids. Right. Everything works together in a balance that you have to work out. But as Christians, there is one final thing: God first. We're called to love others, but we're called to love God first.
I agree. Well said. That's really the heart of the message that I was hoping to get across, really, when I was starting out, after getting through, I talked about kind of getting through the research and being surprised at what I found. But then I started comparing and contrasting where we're at with mothers today with the mothers who were in the Bible. And they're so different, so vastly different. And I know it's tempting to hear that and think, oh, that's because moms today aren't doing enough. But that's actually not the case. And looking at the mothers who are in the Bible, I mean, they've got some stories. Those ladies have some serious stories. But then also comparing and contrasting that with church history and who has the church, which mothers have the church held up as Christian examples, and why? Why did they hold them up as Christian examples? And again, just this huge disconnect between what we would say would be an example today versus what we find in the Bible, what we find in church history. And I think the other thing is that we've gotten to be very homogenous in our picture of what mothers should be like. And there's room really for race and age and culture and socioeconomic status. There's room for all of those things, but you still have to mother this way. Whatever category you fall into, this is still how you need to prioritize your time. This is still how you need to be raising your children. And it's very definite, really, even with all of the variety that we have. But that is not what you find throughout history, specifically church history, which is where my research was. And that is not what you find in the Bible either. So if you're looking in the Bible for something that's going to back up this picture, this specific way to mother that we've got in 2025 USA, you're not going to find that. No. What you're going to find when you really dig into it is surprising in comparison. But yeah.
I like to think about different cultures. And when I say culture, a lot of people hear more race. When I say culture, I'm talking about a shared belief system, I guess. So you have a church culture. You have each family has their own family culture. You have a work culture, a nation culture, all these different cultures. But you look through most of history, like we referenced earlier, things were communal. There was none of this, you're doing it alone. You might have had the quote-unquote nuclear family, but not in the context that we apply nuclear family today, where nuclear family is one isolated unit, just parents and kids, and everything else has no crossover intersection. Like, I feel we've gone too isolationist. Everything was community. And I think that's one of the things Christ called us back to was community. That's why we talk about each other as brothers and sisters. Right. Because that community, that family is so important.
We didn't separate out into our little family units really until like the Victorian age, like that's Industrial Revolution that kind of changed how people were making their living, basically. But so then it changed how they were living day to day, where suddenly you have one person. I mean, there was no such thing as a stay-at-home mom because everybody stayed at home. Like everyone was a stay-at-home parent and everyone worked from home and they all worked together. But suddenly you have dad leaving the household to go to whatever his job happened to be in the industrial era, and that left mom at home with the kids. And of course, then around that same time and then shortly thereafter, where we kind of run into the more scientific era, there were great strides in understanding child development. And some of it, actually, really, I would think all of it was very good. learning how children grow and develop and learn. They're not just small adults who are really bad. And they're not just empty vessels to be stuffed full of knowledge. They're growing and learning. And you have these really important landmark things happening, like now we have child labor laws and things like that, which are really, really positive. And I would not go back, obviously. But that also created this extended childhood. And instead of the village being in charge of raising children throughout this extended childhood, moms are in charge. And suddenly we're isolated in a way that we've never been before either. So, it all just kind of flowed in together. And I think you're exactly right. Like it really didn't used to be like that.
Yeah.
Really, you had that community, you had your family, you had your village. And,
I think it's even a step further than that too. What comes to mind is the two shall become one.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look back, like you mentioned, the colonial, okay, if you're working a farm together, both parents were there. It wasn't mom's completely responsible for kids or dad's completely responsible just for work. Everybody operated as one unit. The two operated as one. And we've separated that out. That's where I go back to the individualistic nature somewhat of the West, I guess, is we're so focused on having our separate identities where I feel very much the Bible calls us to operate as one. The two shall become one. Operate as one together. Like that doesn't mean you can't have your own careers or you can't have different thoughts. It's not like you're mirror copies of each other in any sense of the form, but we should operate together as one in our parenting, in everything. And I feel like we've relegated that to one individual.
By and large, yes, that's definitely the case. And I also, we're not going to go back to that. We're not going to go back to that communal system where we're all living together. And goodness, can you imagine if we all lived with our parents and grandparents in our middle age, like that's, but what, and while there were definite advantages to that system, I just have to point out, it was also a highly patriarchal system. So as we've had some advances in like child development, we've also come a ways in more egalitarian relationships as well. But we're missing it, not everyone, of course, but we're missing it in the parenting category of relationship and of doing life. But the challenge now is to figure out, how do we make this work in a way that makes sense in our lives today? Because we often do have jobs outside the home. And when we have jobs in the home, they are adult specific jobs. They're not generally something your child is going to help you with, as was the case in history, throughout history. What is our village today? And how do we kind of piecemeal together those things? There are some advantages, like if part of your village was this warm, loving, supportive, encouraging family, then wonderful. But if you just happened to be born into a cranky family, that was it. That's who you got to live with forever. So now we do get to, and that's who your children lived with forever as well. Like there weren't options. There wasn't choice in the matter.
That was the idea of generational curses.
Yes, right. And boy, you really see that traced down through families, where now if you're born into a cranky family, you decide how much your children interact. I guess your family also decides, yes. But you're able to say, well, maybe that's not my village, but here's this wonderful church family that I choose to go to. Even if if both parents decide that they're going to work outside of the home, where are our children going to be? Maybe they're going to be at grandma and grandpa's house. Maybe they're going to be at a learning center. You get to have more input into what your village is going to be and how you're going to create that for your children. You're not just stuck with what you're born into. So there are advantages if you can look at it that way. But it's also then that community is not built in. No. You have to be intentional about that. And I think we're not always encouraged to do that. We're not always encouraged to utilize some of the resources that we have because everyone just thinks mom should do it. Back to the point where we started, of that individual. And mom thinks she should do it too, quite often. Like, that was where I was at. Like, I just need to work harder. Like, it's not working. Obviously, I need to do that. I need to be the one to make that happen, which was not really the case. And I'll say that that was coming from a person in the best of circumstances, right? There's no blinders on here. I was not. We certainly weren't rich, when our kids were young, but I wasn't worried where my next meal was going to come from. I was in a warm, loving relationship, a stable relationship. I never worried if Brian would be there or not. Just for that marriage side of the relationship, that was not a stressor for me. He's also an amazing parent. He's an amazing parent. And I still felt like I needed to take all of that pressure onto myself. I didn't need to do that. I just felt like I needed to. And so I tried. In the best of circumstances, that's what, and I was called as a pastor. So I'm not one who has historically bought into hugely complementarian values. Really, I should have known better. I should have. And there, I don't feel like I need to take that extra guilt on, but in the best of circumstances, it's very easy to do that. And I know that not everyone is in the best of circumstances. So
yeah. My thought goes to, in a society that is pushing more and more individualism, we're called to community in the church and to loving others. So it's like that can be a place where we step in and help lead people to have that community and relationship and provide those resources and help with each other along this. We can be that village for those people, and take a lot of that shame away. Mm-hmm.
That's the hope. I mean, that's really the hope. That's and things like this podcast and just talking about it to say, hey, it doesn't have to be just you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just you. And while it's important, mothering is not the most important thing in your life, So those kind of that pair.
There's another dynamic there too. I've heard a lot of psychologists or counselors talk about parents who prioritize their kids to the detriment of their relationship. Mm-hmm. One of the best things you can do for your kids is have a stable relationship with your spouse. Mm-hmm. But too often, again, we take that idolatry of relationship and put kids absolutely above everything and neglect our spouse, which then isn't always in their best interest. It's like you have to take a complete picture, not one single thing to the exclusion of other things. Mm-hmm. And I find that interesting. It's like if you want to do good for your kids, quite often you need to take more into consideration than just your kids.
Yes.
But people take that in isolation.
Yes. And it is absolutely important. If you're married, I know there's a lot of single parents as well, who also need to find their way through and need to find their priorities and need to build their village, whatever that ends up looking like. But yeah, it is really important to have that stable foundation to launch from.
Yeah.
And even just having that, that peace in the house, right?
Yes.
and having that sort of environment of love, I guess. That we all care about each other here and have each other's best interests in mind, and we're investing in these relationships, investing in each other. Yeah.
I have a couple thoughts that are kind of coming together here. One of my previous guests, Rachel Fabi, she deals with postpartum therapy, and she's a doula. And one of the things she talks about is, again, women and shame around motherhood. A lot of her research seems to be around the shame side, and kind of playing off what you were saying, like you felt like you just had to step up, you had to take on more. And so it comes to mind, one of the quotes she said was, we need to encourage each other to be willing to accept help. Yeah. It's very easy. You mentioned this in your book. If one person steps up, it's very easy to step away because they're passionate about that. Sure, let them take that on. But at the same time, there still needs to be community there. And everybody's called to different things. Maybe someone is called to be a stay-at-home mom. Yeah. That still doesn't mean she does stay-at-home mom in isolation. She still should have that community and help around, whether it's a spouse or a friend or the church. Like, you can't do anything in isolation. And when you try to, there's that shame. So it's like combating that early. Be willing to accept help. There's no such thing as perfection in humanity. Quote my mom always said, anytime someone says, you're really good, she would say, there's none good but God. We're not perfect and we're never going to be. So like, you know what I mean by that?
Yes,
like,
I do. I know the theological wheels are turning, but I do know what you mean.
Like, we're not perfect. We do have to accept help. And when we're able to do that, again, that builds that community and interaction, and we can overcome that shame. So one of the advice she gives to early mothers is let people come in and help you. Your house doesn't have to be perfect. You know, you just had a baby. Let someone come in. If they offer to do the dishes, don't take that as a shame trigger. Oh, no, I was supposed to have the house perfect before someone came over. It's like motherhood, parenting, everything is a season of receiving too, not just of endless giving of yourself.
I think you're spot on. And that is really hard to do. Probably some personalities more than others, but for me, that was really hard to do. The other thing is that it's okay to let some things go.
Yeah.
Like, that is okay. You mentioned the dishes. That's one thing I'm okay with letting go. We still have to live there. You know, it still has to be safe, I guess, but it doesn't have to be perfect in those ways, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it depends on what your definition of perfect is, but finding that balance, because again, just the acknowledgement that over the years, we've just added layer upon layer upon layer to what is expected and what this kind of picture of the perfect mom is, that even a couple of decades ago, layers have been added since then. You know, it's it just keeps growing. It's an industry now, really. And it's a big one. It's a big industry now.
Well, your mind kind of goes back to that 50s housewife or whatever, where it's like, okay, the house has to be perfect. The carpet has to be perfectly vacuumed with exact lines or different things. Like, I think that a huge problem is trying to project an image of being perfect, because we're not perfect. And when you project an image of being perfect, you also make it hard to be approached. Like, you talk to people and it's like, you would think they would go to a house and want to see it clean and presentable. But what you actually find is someone who goes to a house that is perfectly in order feels incredibly uncomfortable. Am I going to step wrong? Am I going to leave a footprint in their perfect carpet? Am I going to be dirty in their house? Like, people become unapproachable when they project an image of being perfect. Like, we are not perfect.
Yeah.
And we need to be real with each other, not presenting this false image.
I mean, I think because I wasn't around in the 50s, my picture of what that is comes from like reruns of sitcoms on TV. You know, I highly doubt, I'm sure there were those who were excellent at it, but not all of those households were perfect either. But I do have a story about that. Which is not really, I mean, it's connected, but it's not, where we were living in Alaska, and we'd been there, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I'd gotten to be friends with some people, but still in that getting to know phase as well. And there was this situation where someone was coming over, and try as I might, I could not find the time to get things picked up before she came over. And I think it was even, I finally thought, I think she was picking me up and we were headed off somewhere. And I finally thought, okay, I just won't let her in the front door. This is not going to happen, obviously. And I don't even remember all the different circumstances that I couldn't even get the front room clean. You know, sometimes you get the front room clean, but throw everything in the bedroom so that it's presentable. I just finally thought, okay, I'm just not going to let her in. And she showed up, and I don't even remember the exact whatever it was, but I had to let her in the house. And I was just a little bit mortified that I had to let her in the house. I didn't say anything, but she came in and it was messy. It was, I think there was laundry out and whatever else had been going on. It was just messy. And she didn't say anything. She was a kind and gracious friend. And we went on with our day and off to whatever it was. Well, about a week later, I showed up at her house, and I just got emotional. And she let me in. And her house was, she had been sick, and she had stuff out. And that was, I can't even say how much I appreciated that. And I don't think it was intentional on her part. Maybe she thought about it. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she thought, oh, Jean's house is messy. It's okay for mine also. It doesn't have to always be perfect. But the fact that suddenly, when she was having a hard time, she was sick, she would let me come into her house and bring her whatever I was bringing and chat for a little while. It was that kind of next level of friendship, I would say. You have those levels where you have to clean up before they come over, and then you have the levels where you can drop by, and whatever state it's in, that's okay. So I can't even remember where you started other than that. That being honest,
where we're at,
yeah, that it's okay, and how surprised I was. Like, that was a learning experience for me. How surprised I was at how that actually leveled up our friendship. It changed that dynamic in a good way, in a positive way. Which, when you're standing there hoping not to let them in, you think it's going to change it in a negative way, but that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah. I think early on in relationships, we try to impress each other. And so you want to, first impressions, you hear about that. You want to make the best first impression. So we have this idea, impressions matter. And so putting the best impression forward, you want to be perfect. You want to be the absolute best you can. But the way relationships typically progress is you both start roughly equal, and then someone will be slightly vulnerable, and then you match that vulnerability or go slightly further.
Yeah.
But you can't ever establish that relationship without some level of vulnerability expressing that depth of yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we spend all our time presenting this perfect image, we're never going to get that vulnerability or develop those relationships.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. So true.
But I had another thought there, but I've completely lost track of it now. But yeah, I find the psychology aspect interesting and the people pleasing. And I'm curious on that. Like, we talked about idolizing relationships, and I'm curious if we make an idol of presenting perfection that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I haven't heard it put in that term before, in those terms before. So I'll have to think on that a bit, but I think that we absolutely could. I mean, well, really, you can make an idol of anything,
Yes.
really, but that temptation, we hear so much about comparison and, how important it is not to compare your insides to others' outsides. And of course, social media has just ramped that up exponentially, with people that who are still being careful what they post. But then there really is an industry putting forward these perfect, beautiful images and ideas and thoughts. And I, even when you're aware of it and when you're looking out for it, it's still going to have an impact on you, right?
Yep.
So I would feel like the temptation for that is probably higher now than it's ever been. I would really feel that way. Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind is things in culture, from what I've seen, swing like a pendulum. You try to present too much of a perfect image, people are going to swing to show the exact opposite of that. And so it's like, we aren't perfect. God is perfect, and we're called to be like God. So we want to aim to be perfect, but we're not. And if we fake that we are, we're doing that in falseness. And so if we give off this perception, I think too many people swing all the way over to this other side in response to it, versus if we can present as we are now, that opens more ability for that relationship and not these crazy swings back and forth, and not be as reactionary. So what comes to mind is, when we say being a mother is the end all be all, what's the counter response to that? Okay, don't be a mother at all. It's like, no, that's not what we were saying. That's not the point. Right. The point is you can be a mother and you can be something else. And it's not all just everything is only about being a mother. But it's like the more we have these conversations and can talk that out and not try and state these idols of perfection, I guess, the less we're going to have this extreme swing away from it.
Yeah. And also, you don't have to be a mother.
Yeah.
You can be a very fulfilled adult person, and you can fulfill your calling from God, whether or not you are a mother.
Yes.
So it's important to just note that, just because that's the path that I have taken and many have taken, that's not what God has for everyone. And that is an equal choice, right? That's an equal path of life.
And I do want to clarify, I'm in no way saying that. The only thing I was trying to say is if you make that the end all be all ideal, people are going to reject it just because of that. I think it's fine to not be a mother, and I think it's fine to be a mother. But if you say mother is the end all be all, you're going to have a large group of people that say, well, that's not perfectly realistic, so we'll just reject motherhood entirely.
Right. And I mean, I think there has been in society, and I'm not in a position to personally verify through experience, but there's definitely been that as a society, and not just church society, but society overall as a whole has said this is kind of the highest calling for a woman. This is the thing the most important thing you can do is to be a mother. And that really invalidates anyone who's not a mother, but it also really invalidates anyone who doesn't do it exactly in this box, So there is that to consider as well, that's maybe has that pendulum swing, but then also maybe just completely, I don't know, shames. That would be the word. I know we've used it a lot, but that would be the word. Those who don't fit the mold. Yeah.
I think I used pendulum. I guess the other way is to think of it three-dimensionally. It's not just a back and forth, but the other way is if the end all be all is mothers and they're responsible for their kids, then there's no place for dads to be fathers and take value in that. And
that's true.
so you have this opposite swing and reaction to that as well, where it's like, it's okay to be a dad and it's okay not to be a dad. But it should not be stated that it's the case that the only person that can derive value in being a parent is the mother.
Right. Yeah, that is so important. And I think that's a huge part of kind of bringing some balance as well with this whole like impossible standards that have been built up, is, hey, we're supposed to be sharing this.
Yeah.
This isn't supposed to all land on one person. It was never designed to all land on one person. And in fact, even just landing on two people is not really how it used to work. But of course, you've doubled. You've doubled, and you've brought in a fully different personality and a fully different approach to parenting that hopefully you're working it out and working together to build on each other's strengths and compensate where the other person isn't as strong, or even where the other person's just tired, right? Yeah. Like, I agree.
And I think that goes back to the concept of the two shall become one. Mm-hmm. It is not the case that any two people on this planet in history, future, present, anything are exactly alike. We are all unique. So you can't treat everything exactly the same. That amplifies, because then you bring two unique people together that are in a relationship, and you can't say that any relationship, because that's two unique people in a unique relationship, are not going to be identical to any other unique relationship. Mm-hmm. But those two become one. They have different careers, aspirations, anything, and their approach to parenting is going to have to fit what they're doing. You can't just say only a mother can take care of the kids, or even the flip side, only a father can, because there's women who have careers and stay-at-home dads. Mm-hmm. The whole point is every relationship is going to be unique, needs to be treated that way, and how they approach parenting is going to have to fit to their circumstances and dynamic.
Yeah. It doesn't happen by itself.
No.
Like, you have to work at that.
Yeah.
Like, you have to, because of course it's beautiful to say, well, we're going to build on each other's strengths. We're going to help each other where we're weak or where we're tired. But that can be a painful process as you're working out exactly how that's going to happen in real life, day-to-day, minute-to-minute interactions with each other and with your kids.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so this is also a really interesting thing, and something I didn't know until I dug into it. Might be obvious to others. But we have come a long way in women being able to do things like work outside the home, right? So that women now can have interests outside the home and can have careers and education and kind of go out into that realm. But what was really interesting as I was doing the research is that married couples, men and women, tended towards the egalitarian, or many of them tended towards the egalitarian throughout that time until they had kids. And then once they had kids, things suddenly got kind of wonky. So that maybe they're sharing equally in whatever the domestic work is, the chores or making dinner or whatever it is. But then as soon as they had kids, that balance shifted and changed. And suddenly this woman who before was wife to this man is now mom to the family. And I think it varies couple to couple. Hopefully she's not mom to the man. Hopefully she's still wife to the man. But how that dynamic shifts suddenly. But I think there's a real opportunity there, because if a couple has started out more egalitarian, that they have something they can build on. And instead of just blindly walking into this pattern that has been prolific, in the church and outside of the church, that has been the pattern. But there's a real opportunity that they can and they'll have to be intentional. If you just go with the flow, your chances are more than not that you're going to go that direction where suddenly this woman who's become a mom is going to take on all the traditional mom things. And, there's a whole lot said about losing herself in that process. And faith plays into that as well. But if they've been sharing equally before children are born, if they're intentional about it, there's real opportunity for them to set things up from day one. Bringing the baby home from the hospital, what are our roles going to be from here forward?
Yeah.
So there's real opportunity there if people are aware, even. I think it's really easy to not even know that that's something we need to be intentional about.
Yeah.
But there's real opportunity there. Yeah.
I think one trap a lot of people fall into when they're trying to say, we're going to be partners, we're going to be equals, we're going to share equal responsibility, any of that. A lot of people fall into that, well, I'm loading the dishes, they're not. When reality in a team, when you share equal responsibility, it doesn't always mean you're going to do the exact same jobs. Mm-hmm. I might vacuum, you might do the dishes.
Right.
Or it might be you're gone 1 week and I take all the dishes because you're working. Or it might be that I'm gone for a week and you take on the vacuuming. Like, part of being a team is working together to make sure the final job, I guess, is complete. It doesn't mean that you load half the dishwasher, I load half the dishwasher, and we count the dishes to make sure they're equal.
It's really a shared responsibility. And that's what it comes down to. So like right now, we still have kids at home and it's been a long struggle, teaching them to do their chores, teaching them to have responsibility for their chores. So I'll say, do the dishes and they will do the dishes, but they haven't cleaned the kitchen, right? Like you have to get your terminology right because they haven't taken, even though they know that's their chore, they haven't taken responsibility to make sure it's done and done well, right? Because they're still feeling like, well, that's mom's chore. So she told me to do this piece. So that's what I'm going to do and nothing more. Yep. In the end, whose responsibility is whatever it is, whatever the domestic load is, whatever the income requirements might be, whatever that, children's needs or relational needs, whatever it is, whose responsibility is it in the end? You hear this often of one spouse saying to the other, and often it's the man saying to the wife, well, I'll do it if she just tells me what to do. I'm happy to pitch in and help her. Well, if he's helping her, he's not taking responsibility. He's helping her with her responsibility, right? With whatever it is. And I would say you need to look at the broader picture. It's not just the dishes and the laundry and whatever. There are many other things to be done as well to keep a family moving forward. But who is taking that responsibility? And hopefully it's a shared responsibility. So just what you were saying, if someone's out of town or sick, they're not, whoever's healthy or at home isn't going to say, well, it's their job, so I'm not going to do it. Or even I'm going to do it for them. I'm going to do it because it's my responsibility as well. Right? Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The image that comes to mind for me is my wife was on bed rest for 2.5 months. Right. And not once did I ever view it as, well, I'm doing the vacuuming for her since she's stuck on bed rest. To me, it's no, you're doing exactly your job. You're taking care of you and the baby in the way you need to. The rest of everything is my responsibility. It's not yours that I'm doing for you. It's like, no, I even told her once time, no, you're not allowed to help. Go sit down. Like, no, this is my responsibility now. Yeah. And it's like, sometimes I have to even say no, or she has to say no, let me handle this. You're taking on too much. Like you need that constant back and forth. It's not just for the rest of the time, dishes are yours. The rest of the time, vacuuming is yours. Responsibilities are going to ebb and flow and change based on family dynamics, based on scheduling, based on like, you can't say taking care of a toddler is going to be the same as taking care of a teenager. Like the household duties and the amount of Cheerios on the floor are going to be vastly different. Like everything
Not that
changes.
Teenagers are a piece of cake. Just
no, they all carry their own challenges.
Yes. Yes.
But it's like you can't get in that rigid structure of this is exactly what it looks like and this is the way it is for all time, because nothing stays the same.
Yeah. Although it is good to kind of communicate who we think will be doing what, but just having in mind at the same time that it's a shared responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's that ongoing communication and never make assumptions.
Right.
Don't just assume someone's going to do something and you don't have to interact with it at all.
Yes. And I think, back to where we were talking about day one, bringing baby home from the hospital. I really don't think it's just a matter of, the guy hasn't stepped up. Like it's just as automatic for mom to just jump in and start doing things and maybe push out some help that could have come her way.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you're gonna do it, there's this there was this study done because there's talk about gatekeeping, right? Meaning generally the woman, and that's where the research I think was based, will kind of push men out of helping with whatever she has decided is her job, cooking or cleaning or whatever. It was in that context. But the research that was done revealed that when men did a good job, when they were doing whatever that domestic chore was, women were much more likely to release the hold. They didn't gatekeep to the same degree when they could trust that their partner would do a good job doing it. And in those situations where it was done in a sloppy way, or without thought or care or attention to detail, those were the women who would participate in gatekeeping to a larger degree. So I think it's both and, right? Yep. There's always that balance and situation to situation. But it can't be assumed that it's just because dad hasn't stepped up. But then when dad does step up, he should do a good job.
Yes.
Like take that responsibility that we were talking about before.
I think there's an extra layer that I would add on there.
Yeah.
And that goes back to it being cultural training that we've given. Mm. We teach, I say we, I don't literally mean me. We as a society have taught girls, this is how you clean a house. Mm-hmm. Boys, this is how you change the oil and fix the machinery. Mm-hmm. So then quite often you have men who are just like, I'll do whatever you want. Just tell me what. Sometimes that's not from a case of they're not taking responsibility.
Yeah.
They just don't know how.
They don't know
and
how.
So there needs to be a difference in communication, not just be my mom, tell me what to do, but it's more of, I'm a new employee, for a better metaphor, I guess. Mm-hmm. I walk into a new job. I'm willing to do whatever, but I don't know what or how yet. And I think we need to do a better job of teaching everyone how to operate, even how to be your own person before you even necessarily get into a relationship. Like, teach boys the household as much as you teach the girls. Mm-hmm. And regardless of how those duties shape out in their relationships as adults or whatever, that's fine. But I think too often we get into a situation where people aren't taught on either side. And then it comes into that, I've seen women come in, I'll do whatever you need me to do on the car, just tell me what. It's like, it's not coming from a place of not taking responsibility. It's from that I'm deer in the headlights. I'm perfectly willing, but I'm going to need a little direction because I don't know how. But that could maybe be communicated better in both places. It's like, just straight up say, I will take responsibility, but this is new to me. Just teach me, and I'm willing to own it.
Yes. And I think there is too kind of a degree of, we don't think some of these domestic chores need training without realizing the extensive training that has already gone in to one of the spouses, but not the other, but it's not even acknowledged that this is an actual skill.
Yes.
I think just do it and do it well, and not recognizing that piece. But there are also, I think it's a really good point. We need to be teaching children the full spectrum, really, of what it takes to be a responsible adult. They need to be able to clean up after themselves. They need to be able to transport themselves, to feed themselves. What are those things that they need? Because it is the case, and there are studies that show this, you're going to gravitate towards the chores that because you're more comfortable with them. And really, if that's how you grew up, and it's an equal division of labor between you and your spouse, and this is where you're comfortable, and this is where he or she is comfortable, and it works for you, then that's fantastic. But if there's something that isn't working, we need to figure it out.
Yes.
So, and it's just easier to figure out if you're familiar, right? Like if you've had some training, if you've done it before. But so if your kids are growing up learning to do yard work and to do the laundry, then when they're an adult, they'll be able to fill in those spaces.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, my parents did a chore rotation. Mm-hmm. So we kept 3 main chores, and we had other ones too, but it was like dishes, vacuuming, and bathroom. Mm-hmm. And so we each would have one of those for a week, and then we'd rotate to where we knew we would each get a chance and learn how to do the other ones. And we'd do that on other chores too, with some exceptions. Like, I don't think my sisters ever mowed the lawn. I mowed the lawn. But there was things like that where it was like, you go back to gender roles, I guess, for a lack of a better term. Women do the sewing. Well, I've had a number of buttons come off a suit where I sure wished I had known how to sew a button on. And so I would go back, and it's like, I don't know how to do this. Please teach me. I don't like this. I should be able to solve this problem. And there's lots of little things we don't think about that, but I like the idea of a rotation, even if it works out such that for a hypothetical situation, let's say I always handle dishes, I always handle mowing the lawn, and I always handle vacuuming. And my wife always handles bathrooms and picks something else. Let's say that's just what we've settled into. Not that that's what everybody should, but that's what's felt natural to us. I think we should rotate kids through this. Go spend some time learning with mom, spend some time learning with dad. You need to learn all of these, even if that's not what you always end up doing.
Right. I think that's really important as well. And we've done something similar with our kids on kind of rotating through so that as they leave the house, they are capable of caring for themselves. I will just point out, if it's working for you between you and your spouse and you're doing what you did as a kid, wherever that fits, that's great.
Yeah.
But if it's not working, it might be time to learn something new.
Yes.
And that's okay. We're capable of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I like having a division of chores as a rough guideline. Mm-hmm. Is that I like that rough description of what the responsibilities are, but I never treat that hard and true. Like, roughly, let's say I'm responsible for mowing the lawn and dishes, because maybe they have classes in the evening for martial arts.
There you go.
So it's easy for me to step in. But I don't like treating rough guidelines as hard and fast rules. There's times where maybe someone else mows the lawn, or there's times where other people do dishes. It's useful to have the rough guidelines, but the hard rules prevent us from taking care of each other and taking joint responsibility.
And I would say I lean that way too. I like our family schedule, we need the flexibility. It just gets crazy and busy when your kids are active and you are active. And but I would say that's going to probably look a little different family to family. That there will be those families that need it to be more structured than what I am comfortable with. I think the key is really still that shared responsibility, but also having grace.
Yes.
Have grace for each other, which comes in with that shared responsibility,
Yes.
right? But there will be those who need to say, okay, here's our contract, write it out. And then when it's time to update, we better pull that document out and revisit. I'm sure there are those who need that higher level of structure, as long as they're still approaching it with love.
Yes.
Right. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I meant by if you treat it as hard and fast rules, you're not extending grace to help each other or be understanding of each other. Maybe you have those hard and fast rules. With the grace extended, you weren't able to do this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get upset and judge you and harass you.
Yes.
Or maybe it is you have those hard and fast rules, but if the other person needs help, you step over and help them with it.
Mm-hmm.
If you extend it as just completely 100% rigid with no grace, no anything, that's where problems come in.
Yeah. Which we all need to help each other.
Yes.
We all need to help each other. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a little curious. Now that you've written one book, there's something called the Pareto distribution. And that is once you've done one thing, it's easier to do another. So it's something like only 1% of people are ever going to write a book. But once you've written one book, you're much more likely to write another. So do you have other books in mind?
Oh, I'm going to say no. It's an immense amount of work and time. And I think I need to take some time to be with my family more than I've been able to and catch my breath. There are some books I think need to be written, though, whether I do it or someone else. But I think at this point I've got my hands full with the one. Yeah.
What about taking on more of a role, kind of like, did Diane Leclerc write your foreword?
She wrote my foreword.
What about taking on a role like that for someone where you're helping review and mentor someone else in writing?
I anything I can do to help someone get their message out, I would love to do that. I don't know that I'm expert enough to be that kind of guide. But would I support someone else? Absolutely. 100%. Yes. And I, being on the receiving end, I see how hugely valuable that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Two things come to mind. You said you're not expert enough. I don't know that anybody's expert enough. And the second thing that comes to mind is you often learn more through teaching than in learning something yourself. That's where a lot of concepts really solidify.
That's true.
So, yeah, just an interesting.
Yes. I think Diane Leclerc is expert enough. She might be the one exception.
There has to be some exceptions.
Yeah.
Well, I am curious, is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to, or any challenges that would be useful for people to hear how you made it through?
I mean, making it through was, and still is, kind of piecemeal. We figure it out as we go along, and when you're a Christian, God helps you figure it out as you go along, and your community. Hopefully, you have a community that can help you as you go along. So I don't know that I would say I'm on the other side of anything, including parenting, even knowing that two of my, I'm half empty nest now. That two are off and two are still at home. I think it really does come down to hoping to spark a conversation that extends beyond what I've said and beyond even what we've talked about today, specifically in how our church culture, you talked about a little bit of definition of culture earlier, how our church culture, not just the local church, but the church at large, can speak into this conversation, recognizing that a lot of the messaging has been, if you're a woman, especially if you're a mom, that is your absolute number one priority, even to the point of, surely unintentionally, but discipling women into relational idolatry, where we need to change that culture so that women know, hey, there's not just this one way to do it. There's this whole spectrum of ways to parent, to mother, and that our priority is really Christ. And that's a culture issue more than just a social media issue, or more than just, messaging shows up everywhere, really. But I am really hoping that the conversation gets going on, even in individual churches. What are we specifically doing to maybe unintentionally, speak this way, saying something we're not meaning to say? And how can we change that to disciple everyone, not just mothers, to disciple everyone to put Christ first, while still holding on to what's important, what else is important. So I think that's really the big takeaway is I've put together what I can put together, but it's a much bigger conversation. It's a bigger conversation than me.
Yeah.
So
there's a piece of culture that I wish I could change a little bit. And it comes from a saying my grandpa gave me that I think would help a lot of people. He used to say, "You cannot offend me." And I want to be careful there. He wasn't saying he couldn't be offended. He very specifically was, "You cannot offend me. I choose to be offended or not." And so if we can approach each other with this understanding of, you can't offend me, there's nothing you can say or do that's going to offend me, I choose to be offended or not, then we can approach relationship and learn from each other. And that's where culture can change. If we're very close-minded and not willing to have conversation and hear each other out and get offended at the first sign of anything, that is more a sign on ourselves where it's like, okay, let me take a step back. I'm choosing to be offended. Let me understand why. Maybe I need to take some time to understand, to listen, to weigh out. Maybe I don't agree with the other person. Maybe I do.
Yeah.
But if I just go straight to taking offense, then we're not going to get anywhere. And I think that's a place that has been hard in the church because we approach it quite often with this, God is on my side. No, God is on God's side. God is God. We cannot claim his name as our beliefs, whatever they are. We are to become more like him, not draw him into our likeness. And I think we get very stuck in that, and then that closes us off from that connection and learning and growing. And I think that presents even in this case where if we as a church take on this, the only thing that matters is being a mother, if we're unwilling to have those conversations like you're trying to spark, there can't be cultural change.
Right.
And I want people to learn to have those conversations and temper their ability to take offense.
Me too. I want that too. And I mean, I think the other thing as well is that it would be easy to dismiss as, oh, this issue only pertains to mothers. Or even if we expand it, this issue only pertains to women, whether they're mothers or not. But it's a whole culture. Like that includes everybody, men and women, parents and non-parents. And so I hope that as we are being open-minded, not choosing to take offense, right? That we're also recognizing this is something that's important to everybody.
Yes.
To all of us.
Well, it's back to that pendulum example I gave. It's not just back and forth, side to side. If you're saying the only person that can derive value from being a parent is a mother, that takes away the ability for a father to have value in being a parent. And so we need to be careful on all sides. It does affect everyone, not just, because it's empowering. It is valuable to be a mother. It's also empowering and valuing to be a father. And if you focus too much on any one given thing, that goes back to what an idol is, placing too much importance on one single thing to the detriment of everything around it.
There's also the aspect that if women who are mothers are stuck into this box, then they're stuck there, and they aren't able to be a pastor. They aren't able to work in other areas outside of the home. They aren't able to contribute if all of the weight and responsibility, and it has to be done this way with these unrealistically high expectations, and it's all on this one person. She just doesn't even have the capacity to think of anything else. She already can't keep up. What are we missing out on in the church by having we have a whole lot of women who are mothers in every church I've ever been at. What are we missing as a church body, as a church family, that they aren't able to contribute, that maybe God has for them specifically to contribute because they're locked into this mold that they can't break out of? It's all pervasive. So whether you're a parent or not, we are still all affected by all of that. And even just our perceptions on what a mother is for everyone. We all have a perception of what a mother is. Is it this tiny little mold, or will it expand to include whatever it is God has called women who are mothers to do and to be?
Yeah. An interesting, I don't know if corollary is the word I want there, but you hear a lot of first-time parents. They have their first kid, and it's like, I love them with all my heart. Yeah. And it's like, how can I have a second kid? Does that mean I love my first kid less? And they're locked into this box of, my love is finite. It can't grow. It can't expand. And then if you have a second kid, you realize my love for my first kid isn't diminished at all. My love just grew. Yeah. Like, I have that same love, you do love in different ways sometimes, but you have every bit as much love for your first child, and you have that love for your second child. But what comes to mind as you were talking about, like, your capacity as a mother is not just in one box, or as a father, or any one thing. We change. Our environments change. The people around us change, and we grow. You're not locked into this is what a mother is, and that's what it is for all eternity. You're not locked into this is what a father is, and that's for all eternity. I think this goes back to a little bit in the Bible. We talk about having gifts. God gives us gifts, and we need to use those for him. I don't believe we have one gift and that's all it is for our lives. There may be periods of our lives where we have one gift, and then through another, we gain another. Maybe one, and you can think of that even you think in terms of the family structure. Okay, if you've never had kids, you don't have that gift of being able to mentor someone in having kids. Right. But once you've been a parent now, you can think of that as a gift. Hey, I've been through this. That's something I can share with people. So your gifts are changing. You're growing. You're expanding. What you're able to help people and walk through people in that community you're able to foster changes. It's not the same, and it will always change. Yes.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
But, well, I did want to have you show off your book. I know you lifted it up a little bit.
Briefly.
But I don't know that you introduced it.
Yes. So this is Mothering God and the Mothering God. the relevance of biblical and historical narratives today. And it really does. At the beginning, it traces through history of mothering in the U.S., starting with colonial era up through today. And then there's a whole bunch of stories, but a bunch of stories about mothers from the Bible, and a whole bunch of stories about mothers throughout church history. And then it does take, you see this Mothering God title. There's a surprising amount of mothering metaphors in the Bible that refer to God as mother, which might be surprising to some, but I didn't make it up. It's in there. And so it spent some time discussing both the metaphors of God as mother, but then also some of our other Moses as mother and Paul as mother, that their words, that are written down for us. So it takes a look at some of those. And then the last chapter really is hoping to spark that conversation. Here's some really practical ideas, things that we can do in our local church, in your local church, to address this issue that we have, where we've built up this very specific and unrealistic box for mothers. This is what it looks like to be a good mom, and kind of looks at how can we maybe change that perception. Like, if this is how you mother and how God has called you to mother, that's great. If God has called you to do something else, we want you to have room to do that. And how can we change our culture to make that possible? So, yes.
Going back to a question I already asked earlier, but one question I wanted to add on to the questions at the end of your book was, how do we adjust our church culture to allow for some of these questions? Because I think the thing anybody questioning is going to run into is, you want to say God is mother or say she, you're going to have a lot of reactions that are just instantly, that's heresy, you are condemned. That's why I went back to the I choose not to be offended. How can we change the culture to where we can even have these conversations? Because we can't even get to the questions if we can't adjust the culture to the point of being able to have conversations.
To ask the question. Are you speaking specifically about the roles of mothers in the church, or specifically the metaphor of God as mother, or both?
I'm speaking even more general than that. I think questioning in general across to anything that extends to, like, your book and the concept of mothering God or calling God mother. But I think even more abstracted from that is questioning it all. Because there was a long period of church history, Christian history, where questioning at all was heresy. Then if you're questioning, then you just have doubt. And so it was just a pre-described set of, this is the exact doctrines you're going to follow, and you are not allowed to question them. And I think we've come a long ways from that. But I think there are still a lot of people where they hear something and just instantly, that's heresy. We're not going to have this conversation. We're not even open to it. And if we can't get past that, we can't even get to the conversations that are more specific, like the mothering God.
Yes. And I think that really does vary greatly, like local church to local church to local church. And I think the healthier churches will have space for questions, and they're not offended. They're not choosing to be offended. They're more open to they're not even saying, I agree with you, just let's look into that. We can have those questions and conversations. And then there's the church systems, right, that are much more closed and not open, less healthy. Healthy churches.
I do want to give a slight caveat there.
Sure.
I think people need different churches at different stages in their life. Sometimes they need that close down. This is exactly what I follow because I don't have the mental capacity to question anything. So I do think there is a place for some of those closed churches for people that maybe at that point they don't have mental capacity, or for whatever reasons, they cannot take on any of that questioning. So I want to be very careful. Like, we're not condemning people just for not being opening to questioning. But I think, again, not everything can be one thing. You have to have churches that are open to that.
Yeah. And I do think even the churches that are open to that, part of why they can be is because they have this really solid foundation.
Yes.
Right? Faith is not in question.
Yes.
Belief in God is not in question. Following the creeds, right? Some of our really basic foundational beliefs are not in question. And then that's a great and safe place to look at some of these other things from that maybe we haven't thought about or haven't thought about for generations, because I will say this is not a new thought. That is not you go into the Middle Ages and start looking at some of the sermons that you find there and you're like, oh, they're really progressive. No, it's the Dark Ages. They weren't really, but it's just new to us in our context. But if we have that safe launch pad to start exploring some of those things, that makes a huge difference. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, I will put your book in the description.
Thank you.
Is there anywhere people can follow you if they want?
I'm working on that. You can find me on Facebook. I need to put some together, actually, because on Facebook, when I post stuff of my kids, I have to know you in real life before you can follow me. But
yes.
But I'll pass that on to you once I get it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, whether you have it done before the episode releases or not, I can always go back and update links, and I'll do that.
Thank you. It's a very new experience for me, having, I've never done this before. I'm learning as I go, like everything else.
I think that's all of us.
Like everything else.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. This has really been enjoyable.
Yeah.
Thank you. Also, really fun to just sit down and chat with you.
Yes, I love the conversations. It's so much more fun than having something scripted to me.
Right. Yes. Yes, because then it can go where it needs to go.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you for watching the Brent and Peck podcast.